Have you ever come across that kind of neighbor who seems to have swallowed the condominium manual and spews it all over everyone as if she were the patron saint of good architectural taste? That's right. This woman, who I later found out was called Karen, obvious, right, was exactly that. A sort of human version of the report content button on social networks. Only in person, and wearing a beige blazer that was ridiculously starched to go in the trash. But calm down. I'm not going to start the story from the middle. Let me tell it to you straight. When I bought my house, it wasn't by chance. That house was a dream. A project signed by one of the founders of the neighborhood, a renowned architect, one of those who give their name to the avenue, you know? It was a mixture of classic and modern, full of personality, dark wood, huge windows, and a front porch that looked like it had come out of a romance movie, where the main character sits with a cup of coffee and looks down on the world, just the way I like it. But apparently, personality was a crime in that neighborhood, because the moment the moving truck pulled up and my aged iron chairs and giant vases started to appear, this woman sprang out of nowhere. She appeared like a cockroach in a lighted kitchen. Not even a welcome or a do you need any help? Nothing. She arrived saying that the style of my house didn't match the visual standard of the community. The community's visual standard. Guys, she used those real words. It wasn't a joke. I swear that for a second I thought she was from some architectural commission at the city hall. But no, she was just a resident with too much self-esteem and not enough common sense. The funniest thing was that the visual standard she defended so much was a festival of beige houses with dull balconies and the same wall lights that looked like they had been bought at wholesale in dubious taste. The only thing that neighborhood had in common was a total lack of daring, a graveyard of creativity. And in the midst of that, of course, my house looked like some kind of walking scandal. And that's when the saga began. The woman started passing by my house more often than the letter carrier. She always looked like she was sniffing expired milk. If she could, she would have taken a photo of the entire facade with a ruler in her hand to measure centimeter by centimeter. And look, maybe she did just that, you know? In the first week, I received a printed letter, and laminated, because of course she laminated it, talking about non-compliance with community standards. A list of demands: paint the balcony, replace the flower pots at the entrance, and amazingly, cover part of the windows because they reflected too much sun into the eyes of the neighbors. At that point, I laughed. I swear, what reflects too much is a mirror, ma'am, not double-glazed glass treated with sun protection, approved by the neighborhood association itself. And even if it were, go and buy a curtain for your eyes, because I'll take care of my window. But do you know what hurt her the most? It was discovering that my house wasn't just out of standard, it was the original standard, the project by the architect who literally drew the first map of the neighborhood even before the fences were put up. And I had the documents, the signed plans, everything letter-headed and notarized. My house was no exception. It was the benchmark. But I haven't told her yet. Because I'm mean? Maybe. But mainly because I wanted to see how far this woman would go with her antics. And look, she went far. She started poking the other residents. She created a WhatsApp group called Aesthetic Rescue of the Community, where she basically talked badly about my house without naming names. Only everyone knew. She called it a modern architectural aberration, a visual assault, a disregard for the history of the neighborhood. Ironically, she talked about historic preservation while trying to erase the only property that really had a history there. A real loop of stupidity. Meanwhile, I watched from the sidelines, with wine on the balcony, and one of my windows reflecting the sunset directly into her face. Now, that was art. But little did she know that the best was yet to come. Because it was only when the woman decided to go for the legal part of things and started involving the neighborhood committee and even the city council that the story began to take a deliciously catastrophic turn. And the next part? Oh dear, hold on, because then it's going to get real. I could have simply shown the documents, ended the joke right there, and put an end to the woman's aesthetic frustration. But the truth is that it turned into a cheap soap opera that I didn't want to get out of. It was too good to see her freaking out at every flower I planted outside the norm, at every detail that stood out from the bland palette of the neighboring houses. I saw a mixture of despair and fury in her eyes every time I walked past and saw the red chair on the balcony. And I confess, I used to leave her more in the center just for kicks. The problem was that she wasn't the type to give up easily. She had that look of someone who thinks she was born to lead, to dictate the rules, to own the place. It was almost as if she had sworn an oath in front of the mirror every morning. I, the guardian of good taste and visual harmony, promise to hunt down any form of expression that dares to depart from the norm. And it was with this Pinterest dictator energy that she decided to move on to the most enjoyable part of the story, denouncing me. First, there was a formal email copied to the Real Estate Appraisal Committee, a group which, as far as I know, has no legal power whatsoever, but which loves a little meeting over warm coffee and an Excel spreadsheet. Then came a visit from a municipal inspector, a nice guy, a bit lost, who arrived without knowing why he was there. I knew everything. The woman had filed a complaint claiming that my house violated neighborhood rules and could be in violation of municipal land occupation laws. The creature had gone far, very far. The inspector looked around, asked to see the documents. I didn't even hesitate. I opened the folder and showed him everything. Approved plan, license, architect's history. I even had the pleasure of showing him the architect's name, exactly the same one that gives its name to the main avenue in the neighborhood. The guy's eyes widened and he let out a, "Damn, so your house is like the original?" I just smiled. I didn't need to say anything. The man apologized for any inconvenience and left with more shame than authority. I even thought he was going to ask for a selfie with the balcony in the background. Of course, I knew that would drive the woman crazy, and it did. The next day, there she was, standing in the middle of the sidewalk, staring at my facade like someone staring at a mortal enemy. She didn't even disguise it anymore. Now it was personal. She had lost. And for someone like her, losing is not an option. Not when it's a game of ego. Because for her, it was never about aesthetics. It was about control. It was about imposing her own worldview on a community that, frankly, just wanted to plant its lavenders in peace and enjoy the weekend in silence. And that's where the story begins to take a Mexican soap opera turn. She tried to organize an informal vote in the neighborhood group so that measures could be taken against the non-standard house. Seriously, that happened. I had the displeasure of reading the message, in which she referred to my house as a dissonant element that compromises the harmony of the architectural ensemble of the neighborhood. It sounded like the text of a frustrated interior design student's thesis, but it backfired. Most people, even the most neutral, started to get annoyed by the excessive drama. Some neighbors commented, "Oh, I think the house is charming. At least it's different from all the others." One gentleman wrote, "If we want everyone to have the same house, then let's build a jail, not a neighborhood." At that point I laughed. Then I realized that, without meaning to, I had become the underground hero of the block, the silent resistance, the symbol of rebellion against architectural boredom. But she didn't let it go. She started circulating printed pamphlets with suggestions for standardization, where she discreetly put images of adequate houses and an exception that needed to be reviewed. Guess who the exception was? And the most delicious thing about it all was that she did it with an air of, "I just want to help," when in fact, she was more bitter than lemon juice with salt. She knocked on doors, handing out those papers as if she were the missionary of aesthetics, the savior of visual unity. And there I was, watering my plants with water and sarcasm. One night I came home and found a piece of paper stuck to the door, a handwritten letter. by hand. In 2025, with a blue pen and everything. In it, the woman said that she understood my attachment to the house, but that sometimes we need to give up individuality for the collective good. And then, the icing on the cake, she invited me to a neighborhood meeting where we could talk about friendly visual adjustments. I didn't even reply. I took the letter, folded it carefully, put it in a frame, and hung it on the living room wall. It became a decoration item. She wanted war, but she only knew how to fight with stamps and gossip. I had legal and historical ammunition and, above all, common sense. And by then, the story was so good that any move she made became entertainment for me. But when she decided to involve the grandson of the original architect, yes, she had the audacity to go after the grandson of the man who designed my house. That's when I realized that this woman had no limits. And that's where the climax of the story comes in, the part where the game turns on its head. But that's for part 3. You need to understand the level of delirium this woman has reached. It was no longer enough for her to try to bend me over with condominium flyers. Now, she was on a messianic mission to restore the aesthetic purity of the neighborhood. I swear, if she'd been born in another era, she'd be leading expeditions to paint the Sistine Chapel beige. The woman had the brilliant idea of looking for the grandson of the architect who designed my house, because, in her mind, this grandson, who she thought was a grumpy, conservative old man, would be offended by what she called a contemporary distortion of his grandfather's work. A real crime of taste, according to her. As if my balcony with its fern pots was an offense to world architecture. And off she went, trawling the internet, searching for her surname, sending emails, making phone calls. She became a detective, a mixture of CSI and Pinterest. And that's when fate did her the favor of giving her that cinematic twist that not even a Hollywood screenwriter would have the guts to write. Because the architect's grandson, he was an architect too. Young, open-minded, one of those who designs in a container and drinks coffee in a glass cup. An up-to-date guy, full of awards, who had even been interviewed by an international magazine. And what a delight! He knew my house. He had studied his grandfather's original project and considered the house a perfect example of how to preserve a historic structure while adapting it to new times. He even had photos of the facade saved. I admired it. He wanted to see the house in person. So imagine the look on his wife's face when he replied to her email thanking her for contacting him and saying that he would love to visit the property. To congratulate me. Yes, he thanked her for her concern and said he thought it was wonderful to see his grandfather's memory being respected with such originality. The reply was copied to me because she had naively included me in the email thinking that her grandson was going to come with torches and a restoration booklet. I read it 3 times just to savor every comma. It was as if the universe had written a personalized glove slap just for her. Of course, I wasted no time. I elegantly replied that the moment she had been dreading was coming. The true heir to the architectural masterpiece she claimed to protect was coming to personally praise me. I almost wished there was a moral beating emoji just to complete the email. A few days later, he showed up. He was in town on business and stopped by. He was very friendly, very nice, took a photo of the house, asked to go inside, and was delighted with the preservation of the structure. The balcony, which she hated, was praised as an urban breath among the modular repetitions of the surroundings. I almost wrote it down to embroider on a cushion, and before he left, he asked me to take a selfie in front of the house with the caption, "Where it all began." All I could think of was his wife foaming at the mouth. The best thing was that he posted it on Instagram, marking the location, and someone in the neighborhood saw it and shared it in the group. My house became the emotional heritage of the block. Even the quietest people began to comment. Some neighbors sent messages saying that they had always found my facade inspiring, but were afraid to speak out. Others apologized for having stayed on the fence during the meetings. One even wrote that he was going to paint his house in brighter colors because he felt motivated. The woman? She disappeared for a few days. It was the first time she hadn't been in front of my house. Some said she was ill, others that she took a few days off to cool off. I think it was recalcitrance, third-degree ego burn, but she couldn't last long away from the stage. Every now and then, she would come up with a new topic in the group, trying to divert the subject, change the focus. First it was the height of the neighbor's bushes. Then it was the use of unauthorized furniture on balconies. One week, she freaked out because someone had painted her garage door navy blue. Navy blue! What a crime! But what she didn't expect, and I confess I didn't either, was that the tables would turn so much that the neighborhood committee itself would propose a tribute to me. At an extraordinary meeting, they suggested that my house be included as an architectural reference to the founding of the neighborhood in a historic preservation project by the city council. That's right, that house that she wanted to camouflage would now be officially recognized as an example of the region's cultural and urban value. The town hall was going to install a bronze plaque. A plaque. Office. Bronze. When she found out, she did the only thing a person like her would do. She denied everything. She said that she had never opposed my house, that she had always defended the history of the neighborhood, and that she had even suggested the architect's name for the local school square. It was so pathetic that not even her few remaining allies had the courage to support her. But do you know what was even better than the plaque? Her face on the day of the ceremony. Because there was a ceremony, of course, small but symbolic. A little speech from the town hall, the presence of a few residents, an official photo, and there she was, planted on the sidewalk, with a little yellow smile that screamed, "I'm forced to swallow this with class, but inside, I'm biting into concrete." And me? Well, I just smiled, because what could be better than seeing someone who has tried to erase your existence being forced to applaud you? Even so, I knew she wasn't going to accept defeat so easily. The story wasn't over yet. Not with her. Not with the kind of people who prefer to go down the escalator just to avoid admitting they were on the wrong floor. And it was exactly at that moment that she decided to take her last breath of greatness. A final, desperate, absurd, and predictably disastrous move. The woman was already completely discredited in the neighborhood. After the visit from the architect's grandson, the selfie posted with a poetic caption and the bronze plaque on my facade, she practically became an aesthetic ghost. No one took her visual standards seriously anymore, and even the older residents, who used to agree with her out of sheer boredom, began to avoid her as if she carried a virus of chronic annoyance. But the creature wasn't going to let up. She was the type who would rather throw herself off the cliff than admit that she had lost the argument. So she prepared what, in her mind, would be the final card, the masterstroke, the triumphant return. I swear on all that is holy, she tried to start a petition to request that my house be dismantled. Yes, dismantled. She called it a historic relocation, a project to reconfigure architectural memory. She said that my house could be transferred to an urban exhibition space, as if it were a museum piece, and the land where it stands today could be used for a model installation of the new visual proposal for the neighborhood. It was so much delirium mixed with pretension that I began to wonder if she drank ink tea every night before going to sleep. She knocked on several doors, took the petition paper with her, with a clipboard, of course, like any good compulsive condominium controller. She tried to convince the neighbors that this was the future, an evolution, a fresh start. She spoke as if she were presenting a revitalization plan for a European historic center. The detail? Nobody would sign it. One neighbor said, "You're asking me to take away the only beautiful house on the street, woman. Are you crazy?" Another said she would only sign if the project included her moving to another city. Then she appealed. She started saying that my house brought bad energy, that it blocked the natural flow of the street, that it altered the original lighting of the block. She started speaking in a tone like she was channeling architectural spirits from beyond. One day she said, out loud in the neighborhood group, that the shadow cast by the house's balcony was harming the plants on the sidewalk across the street. She couldn't even stand the sun. I read all that and laughed, but I really laughed. I laughed with gusto, because it was no longer just a bizarre story. It was a spectacle, an open-air theater sponsored by the frustration of someone who simply didn't know how to lose. And that's where the fun was. She was completely out of her mind, but still thought she had some power. But then, like any good villain who insists too much, she took a step too far. She decided to forge a petition. That's right, she took the names of old residents, people who don't even live in the neighborhood anymore, and created a fake list with scanned signatures. The idea was to present the document at the next committee meeting and demand an official vote on the removal of the dissenting residents. I don't know where she got the courage, or if she thought no one would check, but her plan was leaked before the meeting even took place. One of the oldest, and grumpiest, by the way, residents recognized the signature of his sister, who died in 2019. He became possessed. He made a fuss. And, as icing on the cake, he exposed everything in the neighborhood group, with prints, comparisons of signatures, and even a 4-minute audio in which he said, among other things, that she should be hospitalized and forbidden to come within 50 meters of any clipboard. From then on, it was official dismantling. The neighborhood committee called an extraordinary assembly, a serious one, and proposed removing her from the community management group. She tried to defend herself, of course, saying that it was all a misunderstanding, that the idea of the petition was symbolic, that the signatures were representative and not official. But nobody bought it. It was withdrawn from the committee, from the WhatsApp group, from her role as event organizer, from the neighborhood newsletter. She was digitally disappeared as if she had never existed. The aesthetic coup d'etat was finally over. And what about me? I just watched. I didn't even have to get up from my chair on the balcony. I saw the complete downfall of the woman who tried to destroy my home using the force of annoyance. The difference is that now the same balcony she hated has become a point of reference. There was even a young couple who passed by one day and asked if they could take a photo there because they heard about the story and thought it was very iconic. Today, my house is not just mine. It's become a symbol. It's become a local meme. I've heard people call it the house that beat beige. I accept it with pride. And what about her? Well, she still lives here, with her pride wounded, her reputation in tatters, and the silence that only someone defeated by their own ego can maintain. Sometimes she drives past, slowly, squinting, as if she's still trying to understand what she's lost. But the truth is that she lost the moment she believed she could control the world with a decorating booklet. She lost when she thought aesthetics were more important than history. When she forgot that, in a community, it's not what you combine that matters, it's what you live with. So now, every time someone asks me if it was worth putting up with so much clowning, I just laugh and point to the bronze plaque on the wall. It was worth it. And so it was. Because in the end, what she didn't understand, and will never understand, is that a house with a soul will always bother those who only have a facade. Leave your like and opinion in the comments.